Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to break down a scenario where a single military strike almost instantly brings global trade to its knees. Imagine the world's most critical shipping lanes just shut down, severed. This isn't just a thought exercise, it's a look at how a regional conflict can unleash a global economic earthquake. For a little while there, things were looking up. In late 2025, it felt like we could all breathe a little easier. The Houthi attacks had quieted down, ships were tiptoeing back to the Suez Canal, and shipping prices were finally starting to relax. But that calm, it was incredibly fragile. And then at dawn on February 28th, 2026, that fragile piece was just shattered. So, what was the trigger? What was the spark that lit this massive fuse? It all boils down to one military campaign with a name that honestly says it all: Operation Epic Fury. This is the moment a simmering regional crisis exploded onto the world stage. Now, we need to be clear. This was not some small surgical strike. The scale here was just unprecedented. We're talking about a massive, coordinated attack on more than 1,700 military sites all across Iran. The official goal was to take out the country's nuclear and missile programs. But the real game changer? The most critical consequence was the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. That single act plunged Iran into chaos and sent immediate, powerful shockwaves way beyond its borders. So you might be asking, why does a military strike on Iran instantly paralyze global shipping? Well, the answer lies in something called the axis of resistance. You see, for decades, Iran has been building this powerful network of armed groups all across the Middle East. These aren't just allies, they're more like strategic assets. You've got the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, and Tehran can activate them. The Houthis had already proved they could turn the Red Sea into a weaponized choke point. And just like that, the lever was pulled. As a direct response to Operation Epic Fury, the Houthis announced that attacks were back on, immediately, and the result was a complete and total shutdown. Within a single day, just 24 hours, all the world's major shipping companies slammed on the brakes. They suspended all travel not just through the Red Sea, but, and this is absolutely crucial, through the Strait of Hormuz as well. And that right there, that brings us to the heart of the crisis. See, this isn't just a repeat of what we saw before. This is something else entirely. We're now dealing with a dual choke point crisis, where two of the planet's most vital maritime arteries have been clamped shut at the exact same time. To really get how bad this is, you have to see them as two totally different problems. The Red Sea closure, that's a huge headache, no doubt. It impacts about 30% of global container trade. It's like a major highway being closed. You can take a really long, really expensive detour all the way around Africa. But the Strait of Hormuz, that's like a collapsed bridge with no other way across. It handles 20% of the entire world's oil supply. And for those tankers, there is simply no detour. The oil either gets through Hormuz or it stays right where it is. So how bad was the shutdown? Well, look at this number. By early March, traffic through the Strait of Hormuz had dropped by 90%. 90. For the first time in modern history, the world's single most important energy superhighway had, for all practical purposes, just closed. The stakes here are just astronomical. When Qatar's energy minister said this, the world paid attention. I mean, this wasn't just political rhetoric. This was a direct, chilling warning from a country whose massive natural gas exports were suddenly trapped. He was signaling the potential for a full-blown global economic catastrophe. Okay, so this shutdown immediately triggered a massive economic shockwave around the globe. The fallout is hitting us on 5 different fronts, and it all starts with the one that hits your wallet first: energy prices. Right away, we saw an absolutely enormous spike in the price of oil. Brent crude, the global benchmark, went from about $70 a barrel to over $110. That's a 57% jump in less than a week. The markets were basically pricing in the terrifying possibility that Hormuz could stay closed for a long, long time. And it wasn't just oil. Oh no, Europe, which relies so heavily on imported natural gas, got hit especially hard. Spot prices there skyrocketed by 80%. That's enough to force factories to start shutting down production, and it has an immediate, painful impact on household heating and electricity bills. The speed at which shipping costs went up was just mind-blowing. Let's take one key route from Shanghai to Dubai. Rates more than doubled, 122% increase in just 3 days. 3. Carriers were just slapping on these massive emergency fees to cover the risk. And this table really puts the whole chaotic picture together. You can see that cascade effect in action. It starts with crude oil jumping 57%. That flows into these insane freight rate hikes, and it all trickles down to the price you pay at the pump, which went up nearly half a dollar a gallon in the US in a single week. I mean, every single indicator is flashing bright red. All this chaos creates what is basically a nightmare scenario for the world's central banks. It's called a stagflationary trap. On one hand, the energy shock is driving prices up, which is inflation, but on the other hand, it's slamming the brakes on the economy. So central bankers are completely stuck. If they raise interest rates to fight inflation, they could easily cause a deep recession. But if they cut rates to help the economy grow, inflation could just spiral completely out of control. There are no good moves left on the board. Now, beyond those big headline numbers for oil and shipping, there are all of these hidden casualties. This crisis is putting the squeeze on some very specific, very critical materials that our entire modern world runs on, from technology to, yes, even our food. Let's break this down a bit. The Gulf region supplies 8% of the world's aluminum. Those producers have already declared force majeure, which is basically legal speak for all bets are off, we can't fulfill our contracts. That's a direct hit to the auto industry. Then you have helium, which is absolutely essential for making semiconductors, the brains in all our electronics. And sulfur, a key ingredient in fertilizer. If you disrupt the sulfur supply, farming gets more expensive, and eventually, so does the food on your table. This gives us a pretty clear risk report card for the whole economy. You can see who's in the direct line of fire. The oil and gas, automotive, and aviation sectors, they're facing a critical threat from both fuel costs and part shortages. Then you have European retail and agriculture facing significant damage. And even the sectors in yellow, with moderate exposure, they're still feeling the pain from all these rising costs. Okay, so we've laid out the problem. It's huge, it's complicated, and it's hitting everyone. So the big question is, what are businesses actually doing about it? How are they trying to survive in this new chaotic world? Well, companies are definitely not just sitting on their hands. We're seeing 4 major responses start to take shape. First, they're scrambling to find other routes, looking at things like overland rail. Second, they're ditching the whole just-in-time delivery model and building up buffer stock to handle delays. Third, for really important, time-sensitive stuff, they're biting the bullet and paying for much more expensive air freight. And finally, this is giving a huge push to the idea of nearshoring. Companies are urgently rethinking how much they depend on faraway suppliers. All right, let's just boil this all down to the key takeaways. First, any hope we had for a quick return to normal in the Red Sea? That's gone. Second, the Hormuz closure is the real game changer here. It's a supply shock with no easy fix. Third, higher energy costs are simply the new normal for a while. Fourth, remember this isn't happening in a bubble. It's piling on top of all the other economic headaches we already had. And that leads to the final, most important point. For any business out there, adapting isn't just a good idea anymore. It's a matter of survival. When you get right down to it, this whole crisis has exposed a fundamental weakness in how our global economy is wired. The era of cheap, predictable, easy global trade is being put to its greatest test. So the question for all of us, from CEOs to regular consumers, is no longer if the next shock is coming. It's whether our supply chains, our businesses, and our economies are built to withstand it when it does.